You think someone like you belongs in this neighborhood? Stay right there while I figure out what you are really doing here. On what looked like an ordinary evening walk through a quiet suburban street, an arrogant police officer decided to harass and attack a calm black woman he believed was powerless, never realizing that the woman he was humiliating had already set the trap that would end his career in front of everyone watching. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The quiet residential street in Maplewood Heights was the kind of neighborhood where the sidewalks were lined with neatly trimmed lawns and the soft glow of porch lights began appearing as the sun slowly dipped toward the horizon. Children's bicycles rested against mailboxes, and the distant sound of lawn sprinklers clicking rhythmically through the warm evening air created a peaceful atmosphere that rarely attracted police attention. Monica Hayes walked steadily along the sidewalk with a relaxed pace, a large golden retriever trotting comfortably beside her on a leash. She wore simple athletic clothing and carried a small crossbody bag, her posture calm and unhurried as she moved past the row of brick houses. To most people passing by, Monica looked like any other resident taking a quiet evening walk with her dog after a long day. But beneath that ordinary appearance was the kind of patience and awareness that came from years of working in environments where observing people mattered more than speaking. Halfway down the block, a patrol cruiser rolled slowly around the corner, its headlights briefly sweeping across the lawns before settling on Monica walking along the sidewalk. Inside the cruiser, Officer Brad Collins leaned forward behind the wheel, his eyes narrowing slightly as he watched her from a distance. Beside him sat Officer Jason Miller, who glanced up from the patrol tablet when Collins slowed the vehicle. "What is it?" Miller asked casually. Collins nodded toward the sidewalk ahead of them. "That." Miller looked through the windshield. "Someone walking their dog?" Collins shook his head slowly. "Does not look right." Without another word, he pulled the cruiser toward the curb. The tires rolled slowly along the street as the vehicle stopped just ahead of Monica. The driver's side door opened sharply and Officer Collins stepped out with the confident stride of someone who believed he was about to establish control of a situation before even speaking a single word. Monica noticed the patrol car and paused calmly on the sidewalk, her dog sitting obediently beside her. She had seen this kind of encounter before. What Officer Collins did not realize was that the calm woman standing quietly in front of him had already anticipated exactly how the next few minutes would unfold. Officer Brad Collins stopped a few feet in front of Monica Hayes on the sidewalk, planting his boots firmly against the concrete as if he were establishing ownership of the quiet street itself. The golden retriever beside Monica sat calmly, its leash slack in her hand while it watched the officer approach with quiet curiosity. Collins placed one hand on his belt and looked her up and down with open suspicion. "What are you doing out here?" he demanded. Monica's voice remained calm. "Walking my dog." Collins glanced briefly at the houses lining the street before turning back to her. "You live around here?" Monica tilted her head slightly. "Yes." Collins did not believe her. His expression hardened as he took a step closer, invading the small space between them. "Let me see some identification." Monica did not move immediately. "Is there a reason for that?" Collins laughed under his breath. "The reason is that I asked." Behind him, the passenger door of the cruiser opened and Officer Jason Miller stepped out, approaching more cautiously than his partner. Miller glanced at Monica, then at the dog sitting obediently beside her. "Brad, it looks like she is just walking," he said quietly. Collins ignored him completely. "ID," he repeated. Monica slowly reached into the small bag resting against her side and handed over her driver's license. Collins snatched it and held it up toward the fading sunlight, examining the card with exaggerated scrutiny. "Monica Hayes," he read aloud. "You are not from this street." Monica remained composed. "I live 3 blocks away." Collins did not bother checking the address carefully. Instead, he lowered the license and gave a dismissive smirk. "Funny. Neighbors usually recognize each other." Monica kept her eyes on him. "I just moved in." Collins stepped closer again, his voice rising slightly. "You expect me to believe that?" Several porch lights flicked on along the street as homeowners began noticing. The patrol cruiser parked outside. A man watering his lawn down the block paused, watching the scene unfold. Miller shifted his weight uncomfortably. "Brad, maybe we should just verify." Collins cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Stay out of it." He handed Monica's license back, but did not step away. Instead, he pointed toward the patrol cruiser parked at the curb. "Come over here." Monica looked at him steadily. "What?" Collins reached out suddenly and grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the cruiser. The dog barked once in surprise, but remained seated as Monica allowed herself to be moved without resistance. "Because I said so," Collins snapped. Miller's expression tightened as he followed them toward the cruiser, already sensing the situation was escalating beyond what any routine encounter should have become. Officer Brad Collins tightened his grip on Monica Hayes' arm as he pulled her toward the patrol cruiser parked at the curb. The quiet street no longer felt peaceful. Porch lights flickered on across several houses, and the man who had been watering his lawn earlier had now stepped closer to the edge of his driveway, watching carefully. Monica's golden retriever remained sitting on the sidewalk exactly where she had left it, its leash trailing loosely across the grass while it observed the situation with alert curiosity. Monica allowed Collins to guide her to the cruiser without resistance, her calm expression unchanged. Collins pressed her toward the hood of the patrol car with unnecessary force. "Hands on the car," he ordered sharply. Monica placed her palms gently on the metal surface. The cruiser's engine ticked quietly as it cooled, and the faint reflection of flashing lights from inside the vehicle's dashboard cast dim colors across the polished paint. Officer Jason Miller approached slowly, clearly uneasy now. "Brad," he said quietly, "this is getting unnecessary." Collins ignored him. Instead, he leaned closer toward Monica, lowering his voice in a tone meant to intimidate. "You know what happens when people start lying to police officers?" Monica glanced slightly over her shoulder. "I did not lie." Collins smirked. "Everyone says that." He reached toward the radio, clipped to his shoulder, but did not speak into it yet. Instead, he pointed down toward the street with exaggerated authority. "This neighborhood has had problems lately," he continued. "People wandering around where they do not belong." Monica's voice remained steady. "I belong here." Collins scoffed. "We will see." He grabbed her wrist again, pulling it behind her back as he reached toward the handcuffs hanging from his belt. The metal clinked softly as he lifted them into view. Miller stepped closer, lowering his voice again. "Brad, slow down." Collins snapped one cuff open. "I'm slowing down." The steel ring hovered near Monica's wrist. Monica spoke calmly without turning around. "Officer Collins, you should think carefully before doing that." Collins chuckled under his breath. "You planning to lecture me now?" The cuff closed around one wrist with a sharp metallic click. The sound carried down the quiet street. A woman across the road stepped onto her porch, holding her phone in both hands as she watched. Monica remained calm despite the steel circle around her wrist. "I'm trying to help you avoid a mistake," she said quietly. Collins grabbed her other arm and began pulling it behind her back. "The only mistake here," he muttered, "is you thinking you are in control of this situation." Monica slowly turned her head, just enough to look at him again. "I never said I was." The answer seemed to irritate him even more. Collins tightened his grip and leaned closer, completely unaware that the calm woman standing against the cruiser had already anticipated exactly how far he was willing to push the situation. Officer Brad Collins tightened the grip on Monica Hayes' second arm, forcing it behind her back as the open cuff hovered only inches from her wrist. The street around them had grown strangely quiet now. Porch lights illuminated the sidewalk while several neighbors stood at a distance watching, their phones lifted cautiously as they recorded the unfolding scene. Monica remained steady against the hood of the patrol cruiser, the metal cool beneath her palms. The single cuff already secured around one wrist rested loosely against the cruiser surface. Collins leaned closer, his voice low but sharp. "You still think you are the one in control here?" he asked. Monica did not react with anger or fear. Instead, she turned her head slightly and met his eyes. "No," she replied calmly. "I think you are about to realize that you are not." Collins scoffed loudly. You really enjoy talking. He grabbed her other wrist again and attempted to pull it tighter behind her back so he could finish locking the cuffs. Monica allowed the motion for a moment, studying his movements with careful attention. Officer Jason Miller stood several feet away beside the cruiser door, his expression tense as he watched Collins continue pushing the situation further. Brad, Miller said quietly, people are filming this. Collins glanced briefly toward the houses lining the street. Sure enough, two neighbors stood near their driveways with phones raised. The man who had been watering his lawn earlier now held his device openly, recording everything. Collins looked back at Monica with irritation. Good, he muttered. Let them watch. The second cuff hovered again near her wrist. Monica's voice remained composed. Officer Collins, this is the last time I'm going to say this. Collins paused only for a second. Say what? Monica shifted her weight slightly, her balance steady. You should stop touching me. Collins laughed under his breath. You are not in a position to make demands. He grabbed her arm again and tried to force her wrist downward. That was when Monica moved. The shift was quick but controlled, almost subtle. She rotated her shoulder inward and stepped sideways just enough to redirect the force of his grip. Collins lost his footing again, his balance tipping forward as his own momentum carried him past the point of control. The open cuff slipped from his fingers and struck the cruiser hood with a metallic clang. Monica stepped away immediately, creating distance instead of continuing the movement. Collins stumbled forward and caught himself against the side of the patrol car, breathing harder now. Miller stared at them in disbelief. The neighbors watching from across the street had stopped speaking entirely. Monica stood calmly a few feet away, her posture relaxed but alert. The single cuff still hung loosely from her wrist. Collins straightened slowly, his face flushed with frustration and disbelief. For the first time since he had stepped out of the cruiser, the officer looked uncertain about what he was dealing with. Officer Brad Collins stared at Monica Hayes as he straightened himself beside the patrol cruiser, the brief stumble still echoing in his mind like an insult he could not ignore. The open handcuff lay on the hood of the car where it had fallen, its steel frame catching the glow of the cruiser lights. For a moment, no one moved. The quiet suburban street held the tension like a stretched wire. Then Collins's jaw tightened. Embarrassment turned quickly into anger. You think that was funny? He snapped. Monica stood several feet away now, calm and balanced, the single cuff still hanging loosely from one wrist. Her posture was relaxed, but there was something unmistakably deliberate in the way she watched him. No, she replied quietly. I think you should stop before this gets worse. Collins laughed harshly, though the sound lacked the certainty it had earlier. Worse for who? He stepped forward again, grabbing the loose cuff from the cruiser hood. You just resisted a police officer. Officer Jason Miller moved closer, his voice tight. Brad, this is going too far. Collins shot him a glare. Stay out of it. He turned back toward Monica and pointed the cuff at her like a warning. Turn around. Monica did not move. Instead, she glanced toward the houses along the street where the neighbors were now openly recording. The man from the driveway had stepped onto the sidewalk, his phone held steadily in front of him. Across the road, the woman on the porch had done the same. Collins noticed and scoffed. Good, he said loudly. Everyone could see exactly what happens when someone resists. Monica's expression remained calm. They're already seeing it. Collins took another step forward. The gravel crunched under his boots. Last chance, he said. Monica tilted her head slightly. You already had yours. The words seemed to hit him harder than the stumble had. His face flushed. Without another warning, he lunged again, grabbing her forearm with both hands and trying to force her back against the cruiser. But this time Monica did not simply redirect him. With controlled precision, she shifted her stance, turning her shoulder and guiding his grip downward while stepping aside. Collins's balance collapsed again. The motion was quick and efficient, the result of discipline rather than anger. His hand slipped from her arm, and he staggered sideways, catching himself against the patrol car door with a loud thud. Miller froze where he stood. The phones across the street remained steady, capturing every second. Monica stepped back once more, giving him space, her breathing still slow and even. "Officer Collins," she said calmly, "you should stop trying to win this." Collins looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. The confidence that had fueled the confrontation now flickered with uncertainty. For the first time since he had stepped out of the cruiser, the officer realized that the woman he had chosen to target was not reacting the way he expected, and that realization unsettled him far more than the stumble itself. Officer Brad Collins stood rigid beside the patrol cruiser, breathing harder than before as the quiet street seemed to shrink around him. The flashing lights continued to sweep across the pavement and the front lawns of the nearby houses, casting moving shadows across the neighbors who were still watching from their driveways and porches. The phones in their hands remained steady, recording everything. Collins picked up the fallen handcuff again and snapped it open with a sharp metallic click that echoed down the block. His pride had clearly taken control now. "All right," he said, forcing a thin smile as he stepped toward Monica Hayes once more. "Enough games." Monica did not move. The loose cuff still hung from one wrist where he had partially secured earlier, glinting under the cruiser lights. Her golden retriever sat calmly near the curb, ears alert but unmoving. Officer Jason Miller stood near the cruiser door, tension visible in the way his shoulders tightened. "Brad," he said quietly, "this is not how this ends." Collins ignored him again. "Turn around," he ordered Monica. "This time we are finishing the job." Monica studied him for a moment before answering. Her voice remained calm, but there was something heavier beneath it now. "Officer Collins," she said, "you are about to cross a line that you cannot step back from." Collins laughed harshly. "You said that already." Monica nodded slightly. "Yes." She glanced briefly toward the neighbors holding their phones. "And every second you continue, the evidence becomes clearer." Collins scoffed. "Evidence?" He gestured toward the cameras with mock amusement. "All they see is you resisting arrest." Monica's expression did not change. "That depends on who reviews the footage." Collins leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You think someone important is going to ride in and save you?" Monica looked directly into his eyes. "No." The single word hung quietly between them. "But I do think you will regret what happens next." Miller took a cautious step forward. "Brad, listen to her." Collins shook his head and grabbed Monica's arm again, pulling it toward the cruiser as he raised the open cuff. "You talk too much," he muttered. Monica did not resist the motion this time. Instead, she spoke one final time, her voice steady and deliberate. "Officer Collins, this is the last chance you have to walk away." Collins smirked, convinced the moment still belonged to him. "Not happening." And with that dismissive answer, he unknowingly stepped straight past the final opportunity he had been given to escape the trap he had been walking into since the moment he stepped out of the patrol car. Officer Brad Collins grabbed Monica Hayes' arm and pulled it toward the patrol cruiser once more, determined to snap the second cuff into place and end the confrontation on his terms. The street had fallen completely silent now. The neighbors across the road were no longer pretending not to watch. Their phones were raised openly, their screens glowing as they recorded every movement. The golden retriever remained seated near the curb, calm and alert, its leash resting loosely on the grass. Monica did not struggle as Collins tightened his grip. Instead, she turned her head slightly and looked toward Officer Jason Miller. "Officer Miller," she said calmly, "you might want to pay attention to what happens next." Collins scoffed. "He does not need to pay attention to anything except helping me finish this arrest." The open cuff hovered near her wrist again. Monica lifted her free hand slowly and reached into the small crossbody bag resting against her side. Collins frowned. "What are you doing?" Monica did not answer immediately. Instead, she pulled out a small black device, clipped to a thin wire beneath her shirt collar, and held it up so the cruiser lights reflected across its surface. A recording indicator blinked steadily in the center. The officer's expression froze. "You see," Monica said quietly, "this entire encounter has been recorded from the moment your cruiser stopped." Collins blinked once, the words settling over him. Before he could speak, the sound of engines turning the corner at the end of the block filled the air. Two dark, unmarked sedans rolled slowly down the street and stopped beside the patrol cruiser. The doors opened and several investigators stepped out, moving with the calm confidence of people who already knew exactly what they were walking into. At the front of the group was Detective Laura Chun. She walked straight toward Monica and Collins, her eyes briefly scanning the flashing lights, the neighbors recording, and the cuff still hanging from Monica's wrist. Collins stepped back instinctively. "What is this?" he demanded, though his voice had lost the certainty it carried earlier. Detective Chun held up a badge. "Federal Oversight Division," she said evenly. Then she looked at Monica. "Investigator Hayes." Collins's face drained of color. Monica calmly removed the loose cuff from her wrist and handed it back to him before turning toward Chun. "Everything you need should already be on the recording," she said. The neighbors' phones remained steady. The flashing cruiser lights continued to sweep across the quiet street. And standing there beneath them, Officer Brad Collins finally understood that every decision he had made in the last 10 minutes had been captured perfectly inside the trap he never realized he stepped into. The quiet street seemed to shift the moment Detective Laura Chun finished showing her badge. The flashing lights from the patrol cruiser still painted the houses and sidewalks in red and blue, but the energy of the confrontation had completely changed. Officer Brad Collins stood frozen beside the cruiser, the open handcuff still hanging loosely from his hand as if he had forgotten it was there. The neighbors who had gathered across the street were no longer whispering. Their phones remained raised, recording everything openly now. Detective Chun stepped closer to Monica Hayes, giving her a brief nod of acknowledgement before turning her attention toward Collins. "Officer," she said calmly, "I suggest you lower the cuffs." Collins slowly looked down at his own hand, as if he had only just realized he was still holding them. The earlier arrogance in his posture had vanished entirely. He lowered his arm without a word. Officer Jason Miller stood a few feet away, his expression tight with the realization that the entire situation had spiraled into something far beyond a routine encounter. Detective Chun reached toward the small recorder Monica had revealed moments earlier and examined the blinking indicator light. From a moment the cruiser stopped, she said, "Everything has been captured." Collins swallowed hard. "This is ridiculous," he muttered weakly. She resisted. Monica remained calm, her hands resting at her sides as she watched the moment unfold. Chun did not react to Collins's protest. Instead, she turned slightly toward the investigators who had arrived with her. "Document everything," she instructed. One of them stepped forward and began photographing the cruiser, the dropped cuff, and the neighbors standing across the street. Another collected the license Collins had earlier returned to Monica. The quiet professionalism of their movements made the situation feel even more final. Collins looked from one investigator to another, the weight of the moment settling over him piece by piece. "You set me up," he said quietly, looking toward Monica. She shook her head once. "No," she replied calmly. "You did exactly what you wanted to do." The words landed harder than any accusation. Across the street, the man who had been watering his lawn earlier lowered his phone slowly, but did not leave. The entire neighborhood had witnessed the transformation of the moment. Detective Chun stepped closer to Collins. "Officer Brad Collins," she said evenly, "your conduct will be formally reviewed." Collins's shoulders dropped as if the last bit of strength holding his posture upright had finally disappeared. The handcuffs slipped from his fingers and landed softly against the side of the cruiser. In the silence that followed, the flashing patrol lights continued their slow rhythm across the street, but the authority that Collins had relied on so confidently only minutes earlier had vanished completely in front of everyone watching. The flashing lights from the patrol cruiser finally dimmed as the investigators finished documenting the scene, and the quiet residential street slowly returned to the calm rhythm it had carried before the confrontation began. The neighbors who had gathered along their porches and driveways lowered their phones one by one, exchanging quiet glances as they watched the final moments unfold. Officer Brad Collins remained standing near the cruiser, shoulders lowered and silent, while the investigators continued their careful work around him. Detective Laura Chun spoke briefly with Officer Jason Miller before turning back toward Monica Hayes. "Thank you for your patience," she said calmly. Monica nodded slightly. "That is part of the job." Her golden retriever trotted back to her side as she picked up the leash again, the dog's tail wagging softly as if the tension of the last few minutes had never existed. Across the street, the man who had been recording earlier stepped forward and offered a respectful nod before returning to his driveway. The quiet respect in the neighborhood was unmistakable now. Monica bent slightly and clipped the small recorder back onto her bag before turning toward Detective Chen again. The rest of the footage should already be uploaded, she said. Chen nodded. It will be reviewed. The investigators began packing their equipment into the unmarked vehicles while the patrol cruiser sat motionless beneath the streetlights. Officer Collins no longer spoke. His earlier confidence had dissolved completely, replaced by the quiet understanding that the moment he believed he controlled had become the moment that exposed him. Monica walked calmly back toward the sidewalk where she had been standing only minutes earlier. The street looked exactly as it had before the patrol car arrived, peaceful and still beneath the fading light of evening. She paused briefly, letting the dog settle beside her again before continuing her walk down the block. Behind her, the investigators' vehicles pulled away one at a time, leaving the street to return to its quiet routine. The porch lights glowed softly, the sprinklers resumed their gentle rhythm, and the neighborhood slowly exhaled after the tension that had filled the air. Monica continued walking at the same steady pace she had before the encounter began, her posture calm and unhurried. To anyone watching from their windows, it would have looked as though nothing unusual had happened at all. Yet the lesson of that moment lingered quietly in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Power used carelessly can collapse in seconds when it meets someone who understands how to hold the truth patiently in their hands. When you reflect on the moment that unfolded on that quiet street, the most revealing part of the story was not the arrival of the investigators or the recording device hidden beneath Monica Hayes' collar. The real turning point happened earlier, when Officer Collins believed the power of the badge on his chest gave him permission to act without restraint. What he did not understand was that authority is not measured by the volume of a command or the force of a hand. Monica never tried to overpower him with anger or humiliation. She allowed his choices to reveal exactly who he was. In doing so, she showed something far more powerful than retaliation. She demonstrated that patience, preparation, and discipline can quietly expose the truth in ways that shouting never can. Collins believed he was controlling the moment, yet every decision he made was actually building the evidence that would undo him. That is the fragile nature of ego when it is mistaken for authority. Real justice does not need to chase arrogance. It simply waits until arrogance reveals itself completely. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.